Welcome back, everybody. Today we're taking a deep dive into a world that honestly, at first glance, might seem a bit like a time capsule.
Uh-huh.
Amish farming.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
you picture those rolling fields, the horse-drawn plows, the whole 9 yards.
Mm.
And it's a picture of simplicity, for sure.
Right.
But there's so much more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
As we dig in today, I think you'll see that it's also a model of resilience and sustainability.
Oh, for sure.
And there's so many lessons that we
Mm.
in, our modern world can learn from that.
I think you're absolutely right. It's easy to kind of, romanticize the Amish way of life, but
Right.
there's a real practicality to their methods that I think often gets overlooked. Their
Yeah.
farming practices aren't just about, preserving tradition.
Mhm.
They're about working in harmony with nature,
Yeah.
not against it, to create a system that is truly sustainable and can weather any storm,
Yeah.
both literally and figuratively.
That's so interesting. I'm intrigued already. So let's start with something that really sets them apart from, the way most farming is done today.
Okay.
And that's animal power.
Right.
No tractors, no combines, just horses and mules.
Yeah.
How on earth do they manage to farm, hundreds of acres using just animal power?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It all comes down to a deep understanding of animal husbandry and a real commitment to that long-term vision.
Yeah.
These animals aren't just tools to them.
Right.
They're partners.
Yeah.
Amish farmers invest years, literal years, in training these animals,
Wow.
building a relationship of trust and understanding.
That's incredible.
They learn to read their animals' cues, and they work together in a way that's so efficient and honestly so beautiful to watch.
Years of training.
Yeah.
That speaks to their commitment to sustainability, I think.
For sure.
Because a horse doesn't run on fossil fuels.
Exactly.
And it doesn't require, spare parts being shipped from across the globe.
Right. It's a closed loop in so many ways.
Yeah.
And the environmental benefits go even deeper than that.
Okay.
When you think about soil compaction, heavy machinery, the kind that's used in most farms today,
Right.
compresses the soil.
Yeah.
It makes it really hard for roots to grow, for water to get down in there.
Right.
But a horse's hoof,
Yeah.
it actually aerates the soil. It improves drainage.
Oh, wow.
It creates a much healthier environment for those plants to thrive.
That makes so much sense. I never thought about it that way. It's like
Yeah.
every aspect of their farming is interconnected.
It is.
Like each practice supports all the others.
Yeah, and that connection extends to their irrigation methods as well.
Right.
You won't find electric pumps. You won't find those big, sprawling sprinkler systems on an Amish farm.
Right.
Instead, they rely on ingenuity,
Mhm.
a deep understanding of natural forces.
So how do they keep those fields watered without modern technology?
Well, you're not going to see them out there with buckets and watering cans.
Okay, good.
Think windmills. Yeah.
Gracefully turning in the breeze,
Mm.
drawing water from deep wells, just using wind power, or gravity-fed systems channeling water downhill
Oh, wow.
from strategically placed ponds,
Mhm.
letting nature do the work.
That's amazing.
So picture this, right?
Okay.
You've got a pond nestled on a hillside.
Yeah.
It feeds water down through a series of channels
Okay.
that have been carefully dug to deliver just the right amount of moisture
Wow.
to the crops below.
That's so cool.
It's efficient, it's elegant, it's simple.
Wow. It's like they've figured out how to make the landscape itself work for them.
That's exactly right.
And it sounds incredibly sustainable, especially compared to like the massive irrigation systems that we see, in conventional agriculture that often deplete aquifers
Yeah.
and disrupt natural water cycles.
And they collect rainwater too,
Yeah.
making the most of every drop. It's a real reminder that sustainability doesn't always require high-tech solutions.
Right.
Sometimes the most effective solutions are the ones that have been working for generations. It's
Right.
like understanding your land and working within its limits.
And speaking of respecting the land, let's talk about soil health.
Okay.
I know this is a big one for the Amish.
It is.
What makes their approach to soil health different from what's typically done in, conventional farming?
Well, for them, healthy soil is the foundation.
Yeah.
The foundation of everything.
Okay.
They understand that you can't just keep taking from the land without giving back.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of relying on synthetic fertilizers, they focus on building soil fertility naturally,
Yeah.
using methods that have been proven over centuries.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, so think composting.
Mm-hmm.
They meticulously collect everything.
Yeah.
Livestock manure, kitchen scraps.
Okay.
Create this rich, dark compost
Mhm.
that's just teeming with beneficial microorganisms.
Oh, cool.
It's like a gourmet feast for the soil, right?
Yeah.
It replenishes the nutrients, improves the structure, helps with water retention and drainage.
So it's not just about like adding nutrients back in.
Right. It's about creating a healthy ecosystem
Right.
within the soil itself.
Yeah,
They're not
yeah.
treating it like dirt.
Right,
They're
exactly.
treating it like a living organism.
Exactly. And they practice crop rotation too.
Oh, yeah.
So they alternate different crops to prevent nutrient depletion,
Hmm.
break those disease cycles.
Yeah.
So for example, they might plant corn one year, followed by beans the next.
Okay.
Beans are legumes, so they've got these special bacteria on their roots that actually pull nitrogen from the air
Oh, yeah.
and fix it into the soil,
That's cool.
making it available for the next crop.
So it's like they've created this closed loop system
They have.
where everything is interconnected and nothing goes to waste.
Right.
I'm starting to see why their farms are so resilient. It's not just about, the individual practices.
Yeah.
It's about how all of these practices work together to create this harmonious balance.
It's a whole system.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And this understanding of interconnectedness extends to their approach to pests and weeds as well. Instead of reaching for those chemical pesticides, they rely on natural methods,
Mhm.
things like companion planting.
Oh.
So, for instance, they might plant marigolds alongside their tomatoes.
Yeah.
Because marigolds naturally repel certain insects that can damage tomato plants.
So it's about working with nature's own defenses
Yes,
rather than trying to fight against them.
exactly. And, it goes even deeper than that.
Okay.
They understand that a healthy ecosystem is a diverse ecosystem.
Mhm.
By encouraging biodiversity on their farms, they create a natural balance that really helps to control pests and diseases.
It's like they've created this mini ecosystem on their farm
Right.
that's resilient because it's diverse.
Exactly.
I love that. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of Amish farming,
Okay.
seed saving.
Yes.
I know this is a practice that's really close to their hearts. What makes seed saving so special?
Well, seed saving is more than just a practical technique for the Amish, right?
Yeah.
It's a cultural cornerstone.
Yeah.
It's a way of connecting with their heritage and ensuring their future. So imagine this, right? Generations of farmers carefully selecting seeds from their very best plants,
Right.
preserving those traits that make their crops uniquely suited to their land and their climate.
Yeah.
It's like they're holding a library of genetic history in their hands.
That's incredible.
It really is.
It's amazing to think about those seeds carrying the legacy of generations past. But how does that translate to resilience?
Okay, well, think about it this way. In modern agriculture, we've become so reliant on just a handful of hybrid varieties
Mhm.
that are bred for uniformity and high yields.
Okay.
But that lack of diversity makes our food system very vulnerable.
Right.
If a disease comes along and wipes out one variety, it could be devastating.
Yeah, that's scary.
It is, right.
Yeah.
But Amish farmers, with their heirloom seeds, they have this incredible genetic diversity.
Hmm.
They're not just planting for next year's harvest.
Right.
They're planting for the future, preserving that genetic potential to adapt to whatever changing conditions might come along.
So it's like built-in insurance against the unknowns of the future.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that diversity isn't just about aesthetics. It's about survival
It is.
in nature and in agriculture.
Yeah. And, their seed-saving practices also highlight their long-term vision.
Right.
They're not just thinking about, okay, what will give me the highest yield this year?
Right.
They're thinking about what will ensure the health and productivity of their land for generations to come.
Okay, so we've talked about animal power, irrigation, soil health, seed saving.
Mm.
It's clear that the Amish have this deep understanding of working with nature.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how do they handle those times when nature needs a little nudge? Like, what about extending the growing season? Do they use greenhouses?
Oh, they do. Absolutely.
Okay.
But even their greenhouses are designed with sustainability in mind.
Okay.
Imagine, stepping into one of these structures bathed in sunlight. The air is warm and humid. Even in the early spring or late fall,
Mm-hmm.
they're like these little oases carefully crafted to harness the power of the sun.
Okay, I'm picturing it. But how do they keep them warm without relying on, fossil fuels?
It's all about passive solar design and thermal mass.
Okay.
They position the greenhouses to maximize sunlight exposure using south-facing slopes and large windows to capture as much solar energy as possible.
Yeah.
And then they incorporate things like water barrels,
Oh.
which act as natural heat sinks. They absorb that warmth during the day and then they release it slowly at night.
It's like they've created these self-regulating microclimates
Exactly.
using simple but effective techniques.
Yeah, and the benefits are clear, right?
Yeah.
They can start seedlings earlier in the spring. They can extend the harvest into the fall.
Wow.
They can even grow more delicate crops that wouldn't normally thrive in their climate. It's all about creating this controlled environment that maximizes efficiency and minimizes their impact on the planet.
It's like they've taken the concept of working smarter, not harder, to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered how they plant and grow their crops, but I'm curious about the harvest.
Okay.
Do they use any modern machinery for that? I can't imagine them bringing in a combine harvester.
No, you won't see any giant machines rumbling through Amish fields during harvest time. You'll see families working side by side,
Wow.
carefully picking each fruit and vegetable by hand.
Wow, that's a lot of manual labor.
It is, but it's also a labor of love. For
Yeah.
the Amish, harvesting is more than just a task. It's a celebration of the season.
Okay.
It's a time to connect with the land and with each other.
Mhm.
It's about experiencing the culmination of months of hard work and careful tending.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
It takes what could be seen as, a mundane chore
Yeah.
and elevates it to something that's meaningful and even spiritual.
Exactly. And, there's also a practical benefit to hand harvesting.
Okay.
It allows them to select only the ripest, most flavorful produce, ensuring the highest quality for their families and for their customers.
It makes sense. Quality over quantity, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of quality, I know they're also known for their traditional food preservation methods. Tell us more about that.
Okay, so imagine stepping into an Amish pantry,
Okay.
right? You're not going to see shelves lined with frozen dinners or prepackaged snacks.
No.
You're going to see rows and rows of colorful jars,
Oh, wow.
each one filled with the bounty of that harvest.
Yeah.
Canned tomatoes, pickled vegetables, preserved fruits, jams, jellies.
Wow.
It's a real testament to their self-sufficiency and their connection to the seasons.
Yeah, it's like a visual representation of their resourcefulness, isn't it?
It is.
Knowing how to preserve food is such a valuable skill.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world where we've become so reliant on, grocery stores and long-distance transportation.
It's an important skill to have.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head there. And what's remarkable is they do all of this without relying on electricity. They use traditional methods like canning, drying, and fermenting, techniques that have been passed down for generations.
It's amazing to think about the knowledge and the skills that are embedded in those practices.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not just about preserving the food, right?
No.
It's about preserving a way of life,
Mm-hmm.
preserving a connection to the past.
Yeah.
It's a sense of resilience in the face of uncertainty.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just struck by how much we can learn from the Amish approach to farming.
I agree.
It's not just about, nostalgia or clinging to the past.
Right.
It's about finding ways to work with nature,
Mm-hmm.
to build resilience into our systems,
Absolutely.
and to appreciate the value of community and tradition.
All of that. And as we move into the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some of the challenges and limitations of Amish farming as well.
Okay.
And we'll look at the broader implications of their practices for, the future of sustainable agriculture.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So far, we've been really focused on, all the individual practices that
Yeah.
make Amish farming so resilient.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
How does their sense of community play into all of this?
Well, it's actually a vital part of their success.
Right.
Their community isn't just a social structure, right?
Mhm.
It's a support system
Yeah.
that really underpins their entire way of life, and that includes their farming practices.
You give us some examples of that?
Sure. So think about harvest time.
Okay.
It's not just each family out there working in isolation.
Right.
You'll see neighbors helping neighbors, sharing equipment, lending a hand with those more labor-intensive tasks.
Yeah.
It's a real time of collective effort and shared celebration.
I can imagine those harvest meals are pretty amazing too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just helping out during the busy times, too. If a family experiences a hardship, like an illness or, maybe even something like a barn fire, the community rallies around them,
Wow.
offers support, offers assistance.
That's incredible.
It's a powerful safety net that provides both practical and emotional resilience.
It's a beautiful example of how interconnectedness makes a community more resilient.
It is.
But I'm curious how the Amish managed to maintain such a distinct way of life you know.
Yeah.
In a world that is constantly changing and increasingly interconnected,
Hmm.
it seems like a delicate balance to strike.
It is, you're right. It's a
Yeah.
delicate balance.
Yeah.
And they're not completely isolated from the modern world. I think that's important to remember.
Right.
They do engage with technology, but they do so very selectively,
Okay.
carefully considering how each new tool or practice might impact their community and their values.
So it's not about rejecting technology outright.
No, not at all.
It's about being intentional about how they use it.
Exactly. So, for example, they might use a phone for business purposes, but avoid having one in their home. Or they might hire a non-Amish driver to transport goods to market,
Okay.
while still relying on those horses for field work. It's about finding ways to adapt without compromising those core principles.
It sounds like a constant process of discernment,
It is.
weighing the benefits against the potential risks.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always easy.
Right.
They face pressures just like any other farming community, right? Unpredictable weather, market fluctuations,
Yeah.
the ever-present challenge of making a living in a world that's increasingly geared towards large-scale industrial agriculture.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's not a simple life
Right, right.
by any means.
So how do they cope with those pressures? What's their secret to resilience?
I think part of it comes from their strong faith
Okay.
and their deep connection to their community.
Hmm.
Those values provide a sense of grounding, a sense of stability
Yeah.
that really helps them navigate the uncertainties of life.
Yeah.
But they also have this remarkable ability to adapt and to innovate. Now,
By finding creative solutions that align with their values.
can you give us some examples of that?
Sure. So, for instance, many Amish communities have adopted solar power
Okay.
as a way to generate electricity without being connected to the grid. It allows them to use certain technologies that, make life easier or improve their farming practices
Right.
while still maintaining their independence and self-sufficiency.
It's fascinating. It shows that they're not stuck in the past. They're willing to embrace new ideas as long as they fit within, their framework of values.
Absolutely.
And speaking of resilience, it seems like the Amish are actually quite well suited to face some of the challenges of the modern world, especially when it comes to things like climate change and economic uncertainty.
Yeah, I think you're right. Their reliance on local resources and traditional knowledge makes them much less vulnerable to disruptions in global supply chains.
They're not dependent on fossil fuels for their energy. They're not dependent on synthetic fertilizers for their crops.
Yeah.
So they're not as impacted by price fluctuations or shortages.
It's like they have these built-in shock absorbers.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
They're not as reliant on the systems that are often the most volatile and unpredictable.
Yeah. And their focus on biodiversity and soil health makes them much better equipped to deal with pests and diseases, which are, becoming more prevalent as climates change.
Right.
A healthy, diverse ecosystem is just more resilient to those kinds of threats.
And we can't forget, the social safety net that their community provides.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not just farming together. They're facing life's challenges together,
That's right.
supporting each other through thick and thin.
Yeah, their community ties provide this level of social resilience
Yeah.
that's often lacking in our very individualistic, fast-paced world.
Yeah. It's a reminder that resilience isn't just about, practical skills and knowledge. It's also about those strong social connections
Absolutely.
and that sense of belonging. But, while there's so much to admire about the Amish way of life, I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not a utopia.
Oh, absolutely.
They face their own unique challenges and limitations.
Of course.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? What are some of the challenges they face?
Well, for starters, their methods are labor-intensive.
Right.
Farming without modern machinery requires a lot of physical work.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging to maintain that level of effort, especially as communities grow
Right.
and young people have, maybe more opportunities outside of farming.
It's a lifestyle that demands a certain level of dedication and physical stamina.
It does. And they also face those economic pressures, right?
Yeah.
Land prices are rising,
Yeah.
which makes it harder for young families to start their own farms.
Right.
And they have to compete with those large-scale industrial farms
Yeah.
that can often produce food more cheaply, even if it's not as sustainable or, as high quality.
So they're navigating a complex landscape, balancing their traditions with the realities of the modern economy.
They are.
Yeah. And within their own communities,
Hmm.
they also grapple with issues like social change and the influence of the outside world.
Of course, yeah.
It's not a static, unchanging way of life.
Right.
Very constantly evolving and adapting. which can lead to, some internal tensions or disagreements.
It's a living tradition, constantly evolving.
It sounds like maintaining that delicate balance between tradition and modernity is a constant challenge.
It is. And, it's important to remember that the Amish are not a monolithic group.
Right.
There are many different communities, each with their own unique customs and interpretations of their faith.
Yeah.
So it's really not accurate to generalize about their experiences or to present, a single idealized version of their way of life.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
It's easy to fall into that trap of stereotyping or romanticizing a culture that's different from our own.
Absolutely.
And it's also important to be respectful of their autonomy, right?
Yes, very much so.
They've chosen to live a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and we should honor those choices without trying to impose our own values or solutions on them.
I completely agree.
We can learn from them, but we should do so with humility.
Yes.
And with a recognition that their way of life is not a one-size-fits-all solution for the world's problems.
Right. It's not about trying to become Amish.
Right.
It's about taking inspiration from their values and their practices.
So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I think it's worth considering this question.
Mm-hmm.
What can we, as non-Amish folks living in the modern world, take away from the Amish experience? How can their practices inspire us to think differently about our own relationships with food, with nature, and with each other?
Those are the big questions.
That's a big question for sure.
Yeah.
I think for me, this deep dive into Amish farming has been a real eye-opener.
Mm-hmm.
It's made me realize that sustainability isn't just about, like solar panels and electric cars.
Yeah.
It's about a way of life.
Oh.
It's about a mindset.
It's a whole approach. It really is.
Yeah.
The Amish, they remind us that sustainability starts with respect.
Mm-hmm.
Deep respect for nature. A willingness to work with nature's rhythms.
Yeah.
And a real understanding that our actions have consequences,
Right.
not just for us, but for generations to come.
And they've also shown us that resilience, real resilience, isn't just about, individual preparedness.
Right.
It's about community.
Yeah.
About people coming together to support each other, to share resources, especially during those tough times.
Their social fabric is so strong, and it's woven through those shared experiences. The work, the meals, the traditions.
Yeah.
It provides this incredible sense of belonging and purpose that extends, far beyond the farm. It's a model of community resilience that I think we can all learn from.
Yeah.
Even if we don't live in, a rural setting.
One thing that really struck me was their approach to technology.
Okay.
It's not about, rejecting progress, right? It's about being really discerning, about choosing tools that actually enhance their way of life.
Right.
Without compromising their values.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
They teach us that technology should serve us.
Right.
Not the other way around.
Yeah.
Which is a powerful reminder in our hyper-connected world. It's so easy to just, get caught up in the latest gadgets, the trends.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can really lose sight of what matters.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Amish farming, I'm left wondering, how can we apply these principles to our own lives?
Right.
Even if we don't have, a team of horses or a windmill in our backyard.
Right. We're not all going to go out and become Amish farmers, but that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
How can we take those nuggets of wisdom? Yeah.
And apply them to our modern lives? And I don't think it's about replicating their way of life exactly. It's about finding inspiration in their core values.
Yeah.
Like simplicity, community, a deep connection to the land.
Maybe it starts with those small steps, right?
Maybe.
Like being more mindful of, our consumption habits, supporting local farmers who are using those sustainable practices, or even just spending more time outdoors, connecting with nature.
All those things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Every little bit helps.
Yeah.
And, as we make those individual changes, we can also start to think about how to build more resilient communities.
Yeah.
Maybe it's joining a community garden, volunteering at a local food bank,
Right.
or even just, getting to know our neighbors better.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected.
We are.
Our actions have ripple effects. And, by working together, we can create a more sustainable and, hopefully more fulfilling future for ourselves and for generations to come.
Well said.
Beautifully said.
So as we sign off today, we want to challenge you, our listener, to think about this.
Yeah.
What small steps can you take?
Yeah.
Maybe even today.
Today.
To incorporate some of this wisdom, some of these ideas from Amish farming into your own life.
How can you embrace those values of Simplicity, community, connection.
How can you deepen your connection to the natural world?
How can you make a difference?
We hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about.
Food for thought.
Inspiration for action and a renewed appreciation for the timeless wisdom of sustainable living.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.